The dolphin, the second most intellectual mammal on Earth, has always understood that the world will soon be destroyed. They made an effort to inform people, but their words were misconstrued as trickery. In the end, every dolphin departed from Earth on their own, leaving behind the straightforward message: "Goodbye and thanks for all the fish." In the meantime, Arthur wakes up in the countryside of England to find that a demolition team is obstructing his humdrum routine outside of his home. Arthur gets upset with the chief engineer since no one informed him of this and hurries to lie down on the ground between the workers and the home. Ford, Arthur's best buddy, abruptly interrupts the discussion and takes Arthur away to the bar while bringing a cart full of alcohol to divert the group. Ford begins acting oddly and claims to be an extraterrestrial from another planet as he consumes more alcohol than normal. He cites their first encounter, when Arthur moved Ford out of the path barely in time as he attempted to introduce himself to a car, as evidence. Ford wants to save his friend from the impending end of Earth because he still thinks that he owes Arthur for saving his life. However, Arthur is saddened by a photo of a woman named Trisha that he has on his phone. After meeting at a party, they got along, but he accepted Trisha's invitation to participate on an expedition to Madagascar since he enjoyed his tranquil life in Britain. At the same moment, a dashing guy by the name of Zaphod took Trisha away, but Arthur never stopped missing her. As they converse, Arthur hears the sound of demolition and runs back home only to discover that it has already been destroyed. The crew flees as a massive spaceship suddenly emerges in the sky and covers the region in a gigantic shadow. Ford is unsurprised. He just tosses a towel to Arthur and instructs him to hang on as he lifts his thumb, revealing a bright hitchhiking ring that leads them directly to the ship. The captain of this spacecraft, a member of the bureaucratic and irritable Vogon alien race, announces to the world that plans have been made to build a hyperspace expressway throughout the galaxy, and that they will have to destroy Earth to get it out of the way. All humans panic as Earth suddenly finds itself encircled by Vogon ships just before it explodes, leaving only dust left. Arthur discovers that Ford is a journalist who has been contributing to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a general reference work providing advice for any planet you would want to visit. Ford has been working on the Earth section. Ford needs to tell Arthur that the Vogons destroyed Earth since he doesn't care if there are aliens. He simply wants to get home. On the guide, Arthur studies about Vogons and discovers that they are the most repulsive species in the cosmos, and that their poetry is a sort of torture. Ford is trying to find a hole in the wall so that he may transmit a fresh signal with his ring. The moment they notice both men on the surveillance cameras, the Vogons instantly transmit a warning over the speaker, but Arthur is unable to hear them. Ford puts a little fish in his ear and describes it as the babblefish, a tiny extraterrestrial that can convert any sound into language you can comprehend. A group of Vogons arrive and arrest Arthur and Ford before tying them up and having the captain recite them some poetry. Ford writhes in agony, but Arthur is baffled by what's going on, though, to be fair, he can't even comprehend the poetry. When the captain asks for their assessment, Arthur feigns agreement and claims it was fantastic while detailing the emotional effect. However, the captain interprets it as an insult and gives the order to boot the pair out. Ford and Arthur are pushed outside the spacecraft by the Vogons despite their pleas to stay within. For a brief period of time, they drift helplessly before a spaceship unexpectedly approaches. Currently, Arthur and Ford are shaped like couches inside of this very spherical spacecraft, but as soon as they scream, they transform back into their normal shapes. Zaphod, who turns out to be the president of the galaxy, is watching the news in a different area of the ship when he hijacked this vessel, called the Heart of Gold. Trisha stops him at that precise time to say that the ship had unintentionally taken up hitchhikers when they utilized the improbability drive, and the system has now recognized them. Zaphod grabs his gun since he thinks they could be from the Galactic Police Force, but Trisha decides to be careful and sends a robot in its place. This robot turns out to be Marvin, who is permanently miserable and only ever has terrible things to say about anything. Arthur and Ford are picked up by Marvin, who then leads them around the ship's halls while pointing out the talking doors. The Vogons sent hundreds of spacecraft into hyperspace in the meanwhile to pursue the Heart of Gold. Zaphod first wants to shoot the pair when Melvin takes them to the president, but he recognizes Ford right away, and the two of them embrace since they are distant relatives. When Arthur recognizes Zaphod from the party, Zaphod is taken aback because he has no idea who he is. When Trisha later arrives, Arthur is happy to see her and attempts to tell her about Earth, but Zaphod pulls him away and threatens to keep it a secret. Zaphod's second head, which is concealed in his neck because, as it turns out, you can't be president with a complete brain, was discovered by Arthur, who is horrified. To beat Arthur and humiliate him in front of Tricia, he also possesses a second concealed arm. Hundreds of Vogon spacecraft suddenly emerge out of nowhere, and the Galactic Vice President and the Vogon commander beg the group to surrender. When the Heart of Gold is forced to enter hyperspace as a result of Zaphod's refusal, the spacecraft teleports to a different location in the galaxy. After, Arthur catches up with Tricia and expresses his jealousy over the fact that she went with Zaphod. In addition to revealing her new identity to Arthur, Tricia also shows him all the fantastic equipment the ship is equipped with, including a machine that can read your thoughts and manufacture anything you're desiring. She is not regretful that she selected Zaphod over Arthur because she has always desired adventure and to escape their little village. Two mice emerge from her bag as she searches for Arthur's wound medication, running from the kitchen. The gang is then shown a film in which Zaphod explains why he stole the Heart of Gold. Deep Thought was a supercomputer constructed many years ago to address the fundamental query of life, the universe, and everything. Deep Thought required 7 million years to calculate the correct response, which was 42. Nobody knew what that meant, and Deep Thought said that since it just knew the response, they needed to build a more sophisticated computer to understand the true meaning. Zaphod needs to go to planet Magrathea, which can only be reached with the Heart of Gold's improbability drive through trial and error, in order to uncover the answer to the ultimate riddle of renown. The improbability drive teleports the spacecraft to a random place in space, and occasionally this gives the passengers strange shape-shifting effects that vanish after a short while. This time, the crew turns into knitted miniatures when Zaphod activates it. As a result, the mice get the opportunity to remove some of Arthur's hair while Arthur is distracted. When things return to normal, they learn they've reached Vilvodovi, the residence of Zaphod's political foe. They dock the spacecraft and see the Jagravarded people, who think the universe was created when a creature known as the Great Green Arcalseizure sneezed it out of its nose. Zaphod intends to pay him a visit. Zaphod meets with his opponent Humma to beg him for the coordinates of Magrathea as the gang disrupts a ritual in which people are praying for the arrival of the Great White Handkerchief. Humma, who is still upset that Zaphod won the election, agrees to give him the locations in exchange for Zaphod bringing back a legendary weapon from Magrathea. Zaphod agrees, and Humma snatches one of his heads to make sure he returns. After leaving with the coordinates, the gang returns to find the Vogons encircling the structure. Tricia devises a strategy to escape as the Vogons begin fire, and the party flees to cover behind a column. To get the Vogons to let her through, she pretends to murder Zaphod by holding an aerosol can to his skull. Unfortunately, the Vogons manage to seize her and immediately take her into custody before resuming their firing on the men. Zaphod is taken by Ford and Arthur and dragged back to the ship so he might flee. Arthur refuses to let Zaphod take the spacecraft to Magrathea and requests to be brought to Vogsphere, the homeworld of the Vogons, in order to save Tricia. They learn via the ship's AI that the mice secretly turned off the ship's steering system. They are forced to fly conventionally and utilize a standard escape cop. The gang arrives to Vogsphere a little while later. Ford straps Zaphod with a hat over his head and forces him to squeeze lemons every few hours to give his brains a boost because he can't think well with only one head. The guys then start walking toward the Vogon jail, but as they do so, they run over swatters on the ground that strike them whenever they move. The trio dashes through the fly swatters to reach the building in excruciating pain since no matter what they do, they are unable to stop them. In the meanwhile, Tricia is questioned by the Vogons and discovers that Earth was obliterated. She finds out that Zaphod signed the document without even reading it since he believed he was signing an autograph when she questions how it could have happened. Tricia will be given to the ravenous bladder beast of Thrall as retribution for taking the president hostage. The three are subjected to a ton of bureaucratic red tape at the front desk, where the Vogons are continuously requesting additional papers. When they're finished, the Vogon knows they're attempting to save Tricia and says she's not qualified because kidnapping the president is such a heinous offense. Zaphod is forced to admit that everything was a misunderstanding by Arthur and Ford, and they now have to refill the paperwork using presidential forms. After much box ticking and signing, their plea is ultimately granted, and they manage to save Tricia before the beast consumes her. Tricia, however, is not pleased to see them and smacks Zaphod for wiping off Earth. She is also enraged with Arthur for lying to her. As Tricia is getting ready to take a shower, Arthur approaches her to apologize and explain her that if he had said yes to Madagascar, then they would have detonated with Earth. The party then takes the pod back to the Heart of Gold. Then, After putting them through a number of strange configurations once more, Zaphod uses the coordinates to direct the improbability drive to send them to Magrathea. A recorded message informs them that the planet has been temporarily closed as they get closer to it. A second communication informs them that 2 missiles have been dispatched to kill their ship after Zaphod ignores it and attempts to land the ship nevertheless. The entire spacecraft trembles wildly when Zaphod is given manual controls to avoid the missiles by the AI. However risky it is to use the improbability drive in this manner, Arthur chooses to hit the button. After a brief period of turbulence, they realize they are in the same location. The drive, however, had an adverse effect on the missiles. One changed into a dish of petunias, and the other into a whale that has an existential crisis before to impacting the planet. The gang now has a secure place to land and can safely explore Magrathea, where they run across a variety of portals. They disagree on which route to take, and Arthur is too scared of the perils of the unknown. Ford and Zaphod swiftly after Tricia when she ignores them and enters an arbitrary portal. Arthur hesitates repeatedly, and by the time he decides, the gateway has already closed. Without knowing what to do, Arthur sits down with Marvin and is eventually discovered by a guy by the name of Slartibartfast. Slartibartfast informs Arthur that his companions are safe before escorting him through another portal and leaves Marvin behind. As Slartibartfast explains that his profession is planning and building planets, his business produced Earth, and the demolition had been the result of an unintentional mix-up, they arrive in a chamber filled with tiny worlds. When Arthur arrives to the planet factory, Slartibartfast informs him that they are finishing up a duplicate of Earth they had stored in the system backup. When Zaphod, Tricia, and Ford eventually make it to Deep Thought, they discover the computer watching television. They inquire about the ultimate question, but Deep Thought informs them that the computer that contained it has been destroyed because it was on Earth. The group searches for the pistol within the computer after becoming discouraged but also remembering the other part of the objective. This is a point-of-view weapon, which briefly causes the user to view the world through the eyes of the shooter. Women are immune since it was invented by housewives who wanted their husbands to pay attention to them. When Tricia hears Zaphod speak her own thoughts, she realizes why she is upset. Tricia had been jumping from guy to guy to fill the hole in her heart, but she had ignored the one guy who could truly understand her. She immediately shoots Zaphod with it to make him understand why she is angry. Before a light blinds them, they notice a few mice when a door behind them suddenly opens. When we return to Arthur, he learns that mice, the planet's most intellectual creature, are a commission paid by Earth. While making people think they were conducting research on mice, animals had been testing humans all along. Slartibartfast then leads Arthur to a duplicate of his house, where he joyfully bursts in to discover Ford, Tricia, and Zaphod seated at the breakfast table. There are also 2 talking mice who claim to have been studying people to discover the meaning of existence, and that they will want Arthur's genuine brain to complete the project. As his buddies doze off due to whatever the mice placed in the meal, Arthur is suddenly confined to his chair and 2 little saws emerge to begin the surgery. Arthur starts asking philosophical questions to occupy the mice, but soon he finds himself talking about his own sentiments and how much joy he's had recently in comparison to his entire prior existence. He mentions Tricia as well, but the mice don't care about love and keep using the saws. When Arthur eventually breaks the chains and uses a bull to crush the mice, he realizes that they are actually the 2 aliens that developed Deep Thought. Then, as the house begins to tremble, everyone awakens as hundreds of Vogons arrive outside behind the Vice President and Marvin, prepared to save Zaphod from his purported captors. The gang accidentally drops the rifle as they rapidly flee and shelter behind an RV. Marvin attempts to join them but is shot in the back of the head, falling to the ground and appearing to be dead. The Vogons reopen fire as the gang is hiding inside the RV, causing the RV to crash to the ground. When it appears like there is no hope left, Marvin unexpectedly activates once again and fires the cannon at the Vogons, causing them all to become sad and collapse to the ground without the energy to carry out their duties. Slartibartfast then appears to declare that the new Earth is now complete and inquires as to if Arthur feels there is anything still lacking. The pair board the Heart of Gold together to travel to the restaurant at the end of the universe after Arthur declares that he will be the only thing missing. He then begs Tricia to accompany him on the next adventure. The new Earth is reassembled as Arthur and Tricia kiss, and the cycle of life resumes. Before the ship departs, Arthur says his last words. "I won't go anywhere without my towel." Unfortunately, these words fall through a wormhole and are heard by an alien race whose language interprets them as an insult. Furious aliens attempt to conquer Earth in their little spacecraft, But when a dog swallows one of them, it demonstrates once more how everything is relative.